There was a time I genuinely believed my photography had reached its peak. The photos were sharp, the exposure was correct, the colors were decent. Technically, everything worked, and yet when I looked at them later they felt flat, boring, lifeless. I couldn't understand why. So I did what most photographers do at this stage. I blamed the gear. Maybe I need a longer lens, more compression, more blur, more wow factor. I chased the 85mm look, the separation, the drama. And for a while, it impressed people, but deep down I knew that something was missing. Years later, after countless hours on unpredictable streets, I had a breakthrough. My photos weren't flat because of the lens. They were flat because I was only using one sense. Most photographers think that photography is about seeing, and of course it is. But it's not only about seeing. I realized I was relying entirely on my photographic eyesight and ignoring everything else. That's when I started thinking about photography differently. Not just as a technical craft, but as a sensory experience. I began to see it as 5 senses working together: sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. And if you only use one, your images collapse. The first sense, and probably the hardest to master, is hearing. Sound can shape our perception of space, and space, much like sound, is invisible. You can't see it directly, but you can feel it. In a large empty hall, your voice travels, it reflects, it returns. There is depth, there is distance. In a small, cramped room, the sound dies almost instantly. There is no resonance, no echo, just surface. Images behave in much the same way. When the distance between you and your subject is small, and almost identical to the distance between your subject and the background, the image suffocates. Everything collapses onto the same plane. There is no separation, no tension, no sense that something exists behind something else. Most photographers never realize this because they never question where they stand. Move further back, step sideways, lower yourself. Change the relationship between planes. Suddenly, the two-dimensional surface breaks into layers, foreground, middle, and background, and depth begins to emerge. When I learned to listen to space, my photos transformed from simple wallpapers into 3-dimensional places, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But space alone can only do so much. An empty stage, no matter how deep it is, it will always be an empty stage. And that's where the next sense begins to matter. If you've been around photography, even for a single day, you probably heard that light is everything. And how couldn't it be? Photography, in my mother language Greek, photographia, literally means writing with light. But there is a misconception about light. Most people think that good light is a beautiful sunset or harsh light creating dramatic shadows. And yes, those can help. They can make a scene look impressive, but light is far more than that. Light exists on gloomy days. It exists in rain. It exists at night. The real question isn't whether the light is beautiful. The question is what the light is doing once it touches your subject. Flat light creates flat emotion. Side light creates dimension. Backlight separates the subject from the background. Even the soft overcast light of a rainy day can sculpt a face, revealing more through subtlety than drama ever could. Some of the most beautiful light I've ever photographed wasn't during golden hour. It was on grey, quiet afternoons when the world felt muted. On those days, light doesn't shout, it whispers. It softly touches its subjects and draws out expression in a way that feels intimate. And then there is night, the colored, fragmented light of the city. Neon reflections, soft gradients fading into shadow. Night light doesn't just reveal space. It creates atmosphere, it adds mystery, it deepens the narrative. But even light on its own isn't enough, because you can have depth of space and beautiful light and still create flat images. That's when your eyesight becomes the next challenge. I speak a lot about focal lengths on this channel for a reason. When you shoot with a camera, your natural eyesight becomes irrelevant. Your lens becomes your photographic eyesight. It decides how space is interpreted, how distance feels, and how intimacy is perceived. And every lens sees space differently. An 85mm compresses the distance. It pulls the background closer. It tightens the frame. That compression can feel dramatic. It can feel cinematic. But compression also reduces the sense of depth. It brings planes closer together. And the more a lens compresses, the more intentional you must be to separate those planes again. This is why an 85mm can be both powerful and dangerous. It can isolate beautifully, but it can also flatten carelessly. Dropping from 85 to 50 and from 50 to 35 often makes intimacy easier. Wider lenses exaggerate distance between the foreground and the background. They naturally create more spatial tension, but they also expose weakness. With a wide lens, you cannot rely on blur to save you. You must compose with awareness. You must use space deliberately. No focal length guarantees dimension. A long lens can impress, it can create that immediate wow effect, but it can also hide imperfections in composition, in space, in anticipation. It can hide the absence of all the other senses. Depth doesn't come from millimeters, it comes from awareness, in how you combine sight, color, timing, and perception into a single frame. Understanding your focal length is important in creating images that have depth. But that on its own is not enough in expressing the full spectrum of your photographic senses. Color adds another layer. Color is flavor. It shapes how an image feels before you even understand what you're looking at. Long before composition registers, color creates emotion. Flat images often suffer from flat color relationships. When every element shares the same intensity and tone, nothing stands apart. Depth in colors comes from relationship. Warm against cool creates tension. Blue against orange, green against magenta. Not in an exaggerated cinematic way, but in a subtle dialogue. Complementary colors don't just contrast, they separate planes and allow the subject to emerge naturally without relying on blur. Even within the same color family, variation creates dimension. A muted background can make a saturated element feel alive. It's not necessarily about adding more color, nothing like that. It's about creating contrast in hue, temperature, and intensity. Flat color often isn't the absence of saturation. It's the absence of contrast. Color is not decoration, it's atmosphere. And when color relationships are intentional, they deepen the space you've already built with composition and light. But there is a final sense, one that comes to give this something more to your photos. This is the sense of smell. This one is one of the most overlooked senses of all, the sense of smell, or in photographic terms, intuition, instinct. The subtle feeling that something is about to happen. Flat images often document what already happened. They react to the obvious. Dimensional images anticipate what is about to unfold. You're standing in the middle of a busy street, people crossing, cars passing, reflections shifting, light is changing. It feels chaotic, overwhelming, but within that chaos, there are patterns, micro moments forming quietly before they become visible. A hand beginning to rise, a glance about to turn, a shadow about to intersect with a figure, a stranger stepping into the frame at just the right second, completing the image. Most photographers react when the moment is already there. Intuition allows you to position yourself before it arrives. You sense tension building, you feel alignment forming, and instead of chasing it, you wait for it. Depth is not only physical, it's temporal. When you learn to anticipate instead of reacting, your images gain tension. And tension creates dimension, because dimension isn't just about space between objects. It's about space between objects in time. For years I thought my photos were looking flat because I needed better gear, a better lens, better light, better locations. But they were flat because I was only looking. I wasn't listening to space, I wasn't feeling the light, I wasn't shaping color, I wasn't questioning how my lens was seeing, and I wasn't anticipating the moment. When you engage all 5 photographic senses, your images stop feeling like wallpapers. They become spaces, they gain atmosphere, they gain tension, and suddenly they're no longer flat. They are alive. So let me ask you something. Which of these 5 senses you think you've been ignoring in your photography? Let me know down in the comments, I would love to read your thoughts. And if this video helped you to see differently, consider supporting the channel by becoming a member, hitting the like button, subscribing with the bell, or watch this video next where we go even deeper into composition. That was all for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I will see you on the streets. Bye bye.